a lot of what we have around retirement is designed for the old days, where retirement lasted about 8 years on average. Once going to last like 30.
Wow.
And so what I'm really helping people do is reimagine this block of time, letting go of some of the preconceived notions of what retirement is. It's not necessarily, it's not a time of decline. It's a time of exploration and opportunity if you've got that inclination to put the time.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. 20-Minute Leaders is a proud supporter of Make-A-Wish Israel and Tech to Peace, and is in proud collaboration with Secret Chord Ventures, J Ventures, Riverside FM, Fusion VC, Birthright Excel, J Impact, Leap, Google for Startups, and Hippo, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. This episode is about retirement. Well, not really, but yes, really. This is about sort of what happens when people finish their full-time job and still have a lot of energy, room, and excitement to explore many more things. Please meet Joe Casey, managing partner of Retirement Wisdom and the author of Win the Retirement Game, which is launching on August 9th. Now, Joe is a coach, is an executive coach. Previously, he was senior vice president at Merrill Lynch. And so this is a really fascinating conversation about his outlook on these opportunities and how to be intentional about what people do in their retirement. Joe is an executive coach who also helps people create meaningful lives after their primary careers. He works with people who aren't done yet to figure out what's next. It is not theoretical for Joe. He's done it himself, becoming a coach 13 years ago after a 26-year career at Merrill Lynch, where he was senior vice president and head of HR for global markets and investment banking. Business Insider named Joe as one of 23 innovative coaches who are making a difference. Joe, your journey is so awesome, from senior vice president at Merrill Lynch to now managing partner at Retirement Wisdom, thinking about this next phase in a very strategic and coherent way, coaching people through this transition. Something that's a little far from, my world. And I'm so excited to jump into your world and figure out, how people are managing through these different transitions and the different things that you've been observing about them and yourself throughout this process. So again, thank you very, very much for being here.
Great to be here. And I'll just point out that for many of my clients, some are in their mid-40s. It's like when you drive in your car and you see the mirror and such objects may be closer than they appear. And that's the case with retirement or this next chapter. It's always a little closer than you may think.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
I mean that a lot of things that you can do during your career will help set you up for your next chapter, perhaps a second act or life after you, as I put it, graduate from the world of full-time work into this next endeavor. And a lot of it comes from the network, the connections that you build, the things you're involved in outside of your main responsibilities, and cultivating your imagination in terms of what could be, once you have the resources and time to be able to do anything that you want.
Incredible. So, Joe, tell me a little bit about your own career and what made you want to deal with retirement as from a coaching perspective. How did that happen?
Sure. So I'm a former HR person. I worked 26 years at one company in Merrill Lynch, but had a lot of diverse experience because I worked in HR supporting different parts of the company, from the wealth management division through technology, and then investment banking, sales and trading, and anything outside of the U.S. in terms of Merrill Lynch International. And got to work with a lot of different people. And when I was promoted to a senior leadership role, I had a coach for a year, because in retrospect, that must have been a hard case. But it changed how I really saw myself as a leader, saw the ripple effect it had on my team and the company divisions that I supported. And I got really curious about coaching. What happened to make me a more effective leader? And I began to study coaching, talked to some of the coaches that we had, became curious about which of the ones that really did better than the others. And I knew that after HR, I wanted to do something in the coaching field, wanted to have a coaching career. So when we were acquired, I thought, what better time? I was 52 at the time and went back to school. So I went to Columbia to be trained as a coach, did a master's degree in coaching at a UK university.
At 50?
Yeah, 52.
And
Yeah,
52. Wow, that's
And
incredible.
a great run. And I thought I'd do it a little later, but I thought, why not do it now? And it was a great experience, especially with the investment I made in terms of studying it, really getting a solid grounding. And as part of that, I had the opportunity to interview 20 of the top coaches, people like Marshall Goldsmith, in person, pre-COVID, obviously, in the US and UK, and learn how they developed their expertise as a coach. Because I figured, I don't really have 25 years to learn this. Let me get a head start. And so that
Awesome.
was great. And I still do executive coaching today. It's my primary focus. I work with large companies, Fortune 100. I also do a lot in private equity backed companies, like coach CEOs of those firms as well. And about 7 years ago, so 6 years into my executive coach career, one of my clients who was being groomed to be the successor to the CEO, he was 52 also, said to me halfway through the process, I've decided I don't want to be the CEO. Can you help me figure out what to do next? Because I want to retire early at 55. And I want to do something with impact, something philanthropic, something greater than myself. And I thought, I don't really know and I have a conflict, so I can't help you with that. But let me see what resources I can find for you. So I began
By the way, I just want to make sure, Joe, I understand when he says the word, I want to retire at 55, but then it's accompanied by a lot of doing, right? I mean, I heard the word retirement and then I heard a whole bunch of aspirations and motivation for things to do. So I'm getting a little confused. What is retirement then?
Sure. So I think retirement for the people I work with today is, what are you going to do after full-time work? Meaning, when you have some freedom, you have some flexibility, and working becomes optional, how do you want to use and invest your time? People who want to play golf, just travel, hang around, chill, and kick back, they don't really need someone like me.
Sure.
But those who have a fire in their belly, so they're retiring, quote unquote, but they're not done yet, find value working with someone like myself to really map out what it is. Because most have some vague ideas, like he did, vague ideas about what they can do. And it's a matter of thinking through what are different ways in which you could use your skill set, redeploy it. Because many people I find in their 40s, 50s, and 60s are looking for two things: greater meaning and purpose, and more flexibility. So they're not necessarily looking to jump into the next full-time thing, but something where work's going to be part of their next phase, but part of a broader portfolio of things that they're going to do. And that was the case with most people I'm looking with. And what's also going on there is, even in your case, we're getting older every day. Hate to break it to you. And so learning about the aging process really helps quite a bit. I went back to school to get a third master's in gerontology, the study of the life course at USC, because I wanted to make sure I was well prepared for advising and coaching clients in this regard. And it turns out that there's some really important things. Number one, that the sense of purpose, meaning and purpose, actually can help determine how long you live.
Huh.
There was this great study at the University of Michigan back in 2019 that found that those who have a clearer sense of purpose live on average about 7 years longer.
Wow. How do you measure that though? How do you measure sense of purpose?
There's a study, there's a database called the Health and Retirement Study, which looks at, it's been running many, many years. And they look at people over on a longitudinal basis, and then examine those who unfortunately passed away and those who didn't, and evaluated based on some qualitative questionnaires. Another set of research was done by Becca Levy at Yale, which looked at how people view the aging process. Do they think about getting older as a negative thing? Some of the stereotypes that are there, so there's a period of decline. Or do they think it as a period of opportunity, mastery, etc.? And those who look at it more optimistically lived, on average, 7.5 years longer.
Wow.
So it's not just the length of time, but the quality of those years that's also involved. So what I try to do with my clients is bring something really important into retirement planning: imagination. If you think about, when you're thinking about getting ready for retirement, you've got to get the money right. And that's a left brain activity. perhaps advisor, or if you do it yourself, you've got to really deal with longevity, how long you likely live, and the resources that you look and need, how you can manage them, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a whole other side of it. How are you going to invest your time? And that's where it takes some imagination.
Interesting. And tell me a little bit about, the work that you're doing one-on-one with these people. What does that imagination work tangibly look like?
Sure. So I'm trained in a process that was developed by two Stanford folks, Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. Bill Burnett runs the design school there, graduate division, and Dave Evans teaches there. They have taught a course there for, I think, over 15 years now, called Designing Your Life. He wrote a book in 2016, New York Times bestseller, and they've had two follow-ups to it, focusing on the new world of work. But basically what it does is it takes the principles of design thinking and applies it to planning your life and career. And it works particularly well with people at this stage of life. And it's really, the way I use it as a coach, 3 phases. Phase 1 is taking a step back and looking at your values and priorities now, because they might be different than they were earlier in your career in life. And what are the things that really energize you and drain energy? So really got to look at what are the critical building blocks. And then phase 2 is idea generation, using a technique they developed called line mapping, which brings more creativity into the process. And then secondly, moving into 3 alternative visions of your future, because their view is there's multiple alternative visions of the future you. So we map out 3 of them over 5 years. When I went through the training with them in person in San Francisco, I did mine. And when I packed up my office, speaking today from my office today in Princeton, New Jersey, across the street from the university here, when COVID hit, I looked at things that I would need to bring home for the next few weeks. Pause for laughter. Well, it turns out that on that Odyssey plan that I found and said, I'll bring that home too, smack in the middle of it was a drawing in my first plan of a book. Because I decided during that process to write a book. And I'm now publishing a book on August 9th.
Incredible.
So it came primarily derived from that process. So you get the idea generation, something like that, and something else for many other people. And then phase 3 is prototyping. We really take these ideas and reality test them through conversations with other people. And that's particularly valuable because you start to find out from others who have done what you're looking to do, what the realities are, what they love, how they get into it, their story, not yours. And you really get a better idea. I had one client who found something valuable by deciding what she was planning turned out not to be what she wanted to do. She was a senior person at a financial firm in New York, was retiring, and had signed up and been accepted for a fellowship at your university, actually. And when we went to prototyping, I asked, well, who could talk to have been through the program? So actually, no one. So she interviewed 5 people and discovered it wasn't really what she wanted to do. So she made a different decision, built a portfolio of her in life with consulting, going back to art school, a bunch of activities. And she called me about 9 months ago and said that was the best decision I ever made.
Wow.
Sometimes learning not the path is equally as important as what the path is.
Incredible. Tell me a little bit about your own journey here. How, you're so intentional. You're not just, reading these books and talking about it. You're actively going back to get 2nd and 3rd masters. You're actively engaging with this in the most intentional way. What really drove you to do this? What really drove you to be so intentional about this?
So I've always been curious. So that leads to being a lifelong learner. My wife has a different version of how she'll describe it. Says, well, he's a lifelong learner, but that's because he has so much to learn. But I think it starts with the curiosity and learning. Actually, the first chapter in my book goes into one of the biggest things that people confess to me when they start working with this client, especially men, is they're afraid of being bored in retirement, coming off a dynamic career. And when you think about it, as Dorothy Parker once wrote, the antidote to boredom is curiosity. If you're curious, you'll never be bored. There's always something else. And so I've been driven by 2 things, lifelong learning and then helping others develop and grow. And that's what I do now in both of those. I also, as you do, talk to people weekly on a podcast. And so I talk to all kinds of different people like you do. And I learn tremendous amounts from their experiences, their journeys, and what they've discovered.
Interesting. Did you know, a few years ago when you started working on specifically on the retirement front, did you realize the impact that this may have, that this is literally, potentially life altering mindsets, just like the phone call that you received 9 months ago? I get that coaching is important and people gain a lot of benefit from it, but here it sounds like tangibly you're helping somebody navigate through a very just confusing time that even if they have been very successful in the past, now it's a new challenge or it's uncharted territory that they've never been to because they have never reached that phase.
It's a great point. I became aware of it through my own experience, because when you first discover, when you quote unquote retire, meaning leave the world of full-time work, is there are a lot of things that you don't expect that you lose. You lose kind of how your time is structured, because when you're working full-time, that's done for you to great degree. And all of a sudden you've got this great asset called freedom, but you've got to really now structure your own time.
Right.
Second thing you lose is status. Is you have had a title, you were regarded as someone, now just a regular person. That hits a lot of people very, very hard. And then again, the purpose part of it. What's your purpose? What's really driving you? So the other reason why I thought it would have impact was because so many people are demographically moving into this phase of life. And it's totally different now because people are living longer. So a lot of what we have around retirement is designed for the old days, where retirement lasted about 8 years on average. Now it's going to last like 30.
Wow.
And so what I'm really helping people do is reimagine this block of time, letting go of some of the preconceived notions of what retirement is. It's not necessarily, it's not a time of decline. It's a time of exploration and opportunity if you've got that inclination to put the time into.
Right. Well, do we, from what we're seeing around the world, you were seeing the retirement phase prolonged much longer, but do we also see then that the entrance to retirement is also adapting? So are people entering retirement much later, and is that compensated for in some way?
There's a lot of things that are going on currently. One thing that's been consistent is the age of retirement's been pretty consistent for a number of years. And the only other thing that's very consistent is that about close to half, I think it's 47% offhand, but people retire earlier than they planned, on average about 5 years.
Oh, wow.
That's because of things beyond their control often. Organizational restructurings, downsizing, et cetera, can force people into retirement. And then family circumstances are another factor, in their own health conditions may change. So in some cases, a lot of cases, people need to be ready for this in advance, because what would you do if you need to move into this different phase? The other thing that's going on now currently is side of the times is unretired. Now, it's not droves of people, but it's on the upswing. It's been going on for quite some time. About the study by the Rand Corporation and Nicole Mason at Harvard, which looked at about 20 to 25% of people unretire within the first 5 years. It's prior to this current period, wasn't driven necessarily by the financial need. It was driven by some of the non-financial factors, camaraderie, purpose, collegiality, etc. And people really wanted to have that in the mix. Now, a lot of it's being driven by people deciding, hey, I need to get back to it. Things have changed. And people are coming back. So it's on the upswing, about 3.5%. I think the last time I saw it, a lot of people are unretiring.
Interesting.
And that's what actually would change the retirement numbers during COVID. There's a couple of studies by different Federal Reserve banks that showed that it wasn't that people were retired, more people were retiring, fewer people were unretiring.
Interesting. So for people that are, approaching the end of their full-time journey, what are maybe a few tangible things to keep in mind or to actively do that you've found very helpful in your coaching? That any person that's reaching that phase will benefit from, even if they don't get to work with you one-on-one?
Sure. A couple of things. One, really pay attention to your network and your connections before you leave. Now, people struggle with this because most jobs are demanding. People are very busy, both professionally and personally. And sometimes the networking aspects of things fall to the wayside. It's really important because you also lose a lot of social connectivity when you leave the workplace. So cultivate those connections, particularly outside of your company, outside of your professional sphere, because you want to really have basically what I call a new tribe that you may want to build over time. Second thing is start to invest a little bit more time in some outside interests. What are the things that you love to do if only you had the time? Because you will soon. Or what did you used to do back in the day that you put aside? Some people return to those things, but that's a really great opportunity to recultivate some of those interests. And number three, really to start to plan what future you could look like. What fast forward out a few years, like what could I be doing? What are those alternatives? What are those options? And have some fun being creative with it. And then talk to people who are retired, who have a similar story to yours. What did they learn? What would they do over? What do they know now that they wish they knew at the stage you're at?
Phenomenal. Joe, thank you so much for this conversation. I hear so much intentionality and passion, and I'm particularly inspired by this notion of lifelong learning and the curiosity that you embody, which is for myself, a young learner, that's it's probably the most important piece of it all. So, Joe, thank you very, very much. Continue making a hugely positive impact on people's lives, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thanks, Michael. Great to meet you.
Thank you
Great to be here.
very, very much.